Mike, Sharon, I have had the pleasure of speaking to this guest on our podcast for Business Booster Monday. And I'm so thankful that she's come back for a Wedding Wednesday episode. I'm speaking about none other than Kawania Wooten. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. Will you share with our audience who you are, where you're located, and a little bit about your business?
Sure. As you so kindly said, my name's Kawania Wooten, and sometimes people rip it apart. So I appreciate anybody who has my name right. Thank you.
It took me out of practice. I'm going to be honest with you. I look at it every time to make sure. I'm going to try my best to get this right.
Every letter's pronounced. That's what I always tell people. And I'm based in Bowie, Maryland, which is considered a suburb of Washington, D.C. But I benefit from being near D.C. and being near Baltimore, which works in the wedding world because that's almost two completely different wedding markets. My company is called Howerton Wooten Events. We have been in business. This will be our 15th year. And I say we were a team of 5. And we consider ourselves to be a premier event agency here that takes care of DC Elite. One of our brides just was sworn in as a U.S. Congresswoman last week. So a lot of our couples are people that people probably complain about on the news and whatnot, and we take care of their intimate moments. I also own a company called the Enlightened Creative, which is a multi-tier educational program that serves business people and creatives who work in the wedding and event industry.
Well, Kawania, thank you so much, Sharon. I know that we've talked about this many a times. We were fortunate enough to meet Kawania. I'll let you share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was really blessed to be able to go to the national conference for the Association of Bridal Consultants this past November. And as a wedding planner, I was just in heaven the whole time. I love to learn and grow my business. Mike and Christina got to go as well. We just had so much fun and learned so much. But I remember hearing you speak and literally could not write fast enough because I didn't want to miss anything that you were saying. And I remember thinking, oh, I didn't ever think of that. Like, you just brought so much to mind when you spoke about being able to manage a crisis at your event. And it's made you've really impacted me because you've made me look at things differently when I walk through. I just did venue walkthroughs the other day, and I did them differently because of things that I learned from you at the conference. So just so excited to get to share what you had to say with our guest, and then for me to learn some more from you because it's a whole different way of thinking.
Yeah.
I know right after she spoke, you came over to the booth quite quickly and said, this is a guest we need to have on our podcast.
Well,
I'd love to talk to her right now, but we need to do a full episode.
When I was sitting there listening to her her spiel that she was doing, I mean, she was just like Sharon said, I was taking notes, and it was just like I was so engaged with you. And I said, we have got to bring her on to our podcast just so she can get out and even, educate more people.
Well, Kawania, now that we have this very large runway for you, no pressure. The topic we're tackling today is crisis management. We're so excited about you sharing with our audience. And honestly, I'm going to let you start where you'd like to with this topic.
Well, I will start right with contracts, if you don't mind, because we happen to be still in a world where cancellations are still occurring. And I believe our knowledge of contract clauses has evolved since February 2020. I know everybody had an acts of God clause, but I don't think people fully understood force majeure at that point. And that covers things such as not just acts of God, and some people call it the impossibility clause. Those are the same thing. And it's force majeure, which covers acts of God, acts of government, acts of terrorism, strikes, anything where it's a work stoppage, those things can affect your event that so many of us have been fortunate not to worry about, but we've become very familiar with things like that now. And that is, to me, understanding you have a good contract first is like the football term, your best defense is a good offense. So making sure that you have a solid contract really does set you up for being prepared for an emergency. And so if I can throw out a couple of clauses, so I mentioned force majeure or impossibility. And I'm in the DC area. So I never thought I'd have to worry about acts of government, but I've had to deal with acts of government twice. One, I've had where a bride or a groom got deployed at the last minute, where we had to move. They didn't get deployed in a day, but to a point where we had to move their wedding. And having that clause helped us get out of losing them a great deal of money because we could move and people were willing to honor that and move with them without charging them cancellation or rebooking fees. A rebooking clause is another clause that probably has come into play since February 2020 for a lot of people because of my experience and my stories tied to crisis management. I've had a rebooking clause in my contract since I started in the wedding industry. And that is to help you make sure that there's some protection if you have to cancel for something other than change of heart, of course, and that you're able to rebook it and not lose all of your money. A cancellation clause. For some reason, I get couples all the time who feel as if I don't have a cancellation clause, I don't have to pay anything. No, you don't have a cancellation clause. That means they could charge you whatever they want. When I say they, venues or vendors. So you want something in there telling you what you're responsible for if you have to cancel your wedding for any reason. And then an insurance clause. You want to make sure your vendors are up to snuff and you want to make sure they're properly licensed. That should be in your contract. You want to make sure, and if we're talking to couples or wedding vendors, you want to make sure whomever you're working with has insurance to protect their work so it doesn't fall on you. And we at Howard Wooten Events require our couples, one, to get insurance, and they are only allowed to work with wedding vendors who have insurance. And it's funny because that was, for years, that became a bit of a challenge because you always run across the cake baker who's like everybody's neighborhood baker, and she's wonderful, but she may not have a food handling license, nor does she have insurance, and it's worked for her for 20-something years. But the minute everybody gets food poisoning and they're ready to sue, guess who's gonna get sued? Either the couple or the vendor who recommended them. So unfortunately, Aunt Annie got to step up her game, get some food licenses and get some insurance, or we're not working with her. And the funniest thing, it's always bands. I will never understand that, but a lot of bands won't have insurance. I think if nothing else, they should have something protecting their equipment. But it's just that, people got together. Again, just requiring your vendors to step up their game. We're not trying to cut people out. We just don't want to be liable if they can't cover their work or anything that may have gone wrong. So I think the contract is that first line of defense. And if I can just share a little bit, as I mentioned, for me, it seems like every natural emergency, I've been through it. So I've seen the effects of, my first job out of the box. I experienced the earthquake that hit San Francisco in 1989. And I know I am showing some age there on that one. That was my first job, first event, and a major earthquake hit. And in the middle of a conference that we were working on. And while I didn't learn about insurance there or contracts, because I was I think I was 22, 23, what I did learn is that, and I think this is so key to wedding vendors, is that people look to the event professionals, especially wedding planners, if something goes wrong. Hey, what are we going to do now? And there might be so many higher ups. They're looking to you. You become that go-to person. So it's better to know where the exits are, who to call if someone passes out or if somebody gets sick. What are the steps that the venue is going to take if something happens? And that's a part of preparing in advance and knowing who should be a part of your team. And in my opinion, that should be the venue, number one, first and foremost, because the venue probably has their own emergency preparedness plan. They don't always share it because venues' emergency preparedness plans also deal with active shooters, and they don't know who the active shooter is going to be, so they don't want to share that with anybody. But what you can do is have a sit down with the venue and say, this is our plan. How does it work with yours? So that we know we're on the same wavelength. I specifically want to know, who do I call if somebody passes out or has a heart attack or an allergic reaction or trips and falls? And I always want to know, and it's so crazy, and I've only learned this because I actually had somebody have a heart attack, is there a defibrillator nearby? I never thought in my wedding planning or event planning life I would want to know where the defibrillator was. But not that I intend to use it. Just want to know if there's one here. Because those minutes are key. If there's one there, there's probably somebody there who's qualified to use it. And I want to be able to reach out and find that person right away, in addition to calling 911. So just knowing the lay of the land, then bringing in the players who can help you carry out those details and making sure everybody's well informed, because it doesn't help if you keep all that information to yourself, because you could be the one laying on the ground.
And see why I just knew that she was going to be a great fit when you all brought it to my attention. Kawania, it's not funny, but Sharon also mentioned, the defibrillator. Sharon, that's something that you talk about.
That actually, when she said that, when I heard her speak at the conference, I actually felt just a little bit validated because my background is in healthcare. And I actually did a wedding when I had first started, and the grandfather of the bride went into full arrest at cocktail hour. And we were at a state park, and I started screaming for a defibrillator, and they knew they had one, but no one knew where it was. And thankfully, he survived. He's fine. But now on my timeline, it says what time the sun sets. And then right underneath that, it says if there's a defibrillator on site and where it is. And the next line is the closest hospital with an ER.
Absolutely.
But I've had so many people tease me about that I put it on my timeline. But I have a good reason for it. It really did happen to me. I was doing chest compressions as a wedding planner.
Wow.
And I totally 100% get why you would want to know that. But like I was saying, like when I do venue walkthroughs now, I do them differently since hearing you speak. I do look at the exits. I want to know, how many entrances there are. I need to know how to get my people out of there. Like I didn't think of all that until I heard you speak. And we heard another speaker at that event with a different story, but she said there was an emergency and everyone said, who's in charge here? And all the heads turned to the wedding planner.
Yep.
And boy, I got my eyes open big time.
Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned where all the exits are. I want to know what time those exit doors lock too, especially the ones that aren't manned. Because, I automatically think of theft. We just have this beautiful little wedding card box sitting out there somewhere. And if the doors aren't manned and it's after dark and somebody can walk in, how will I know where people are coming from and so I want to know when those doors are locked, or will they be manned? So something I don't think we always think of. And then when you do your site visit, one of the things I have is a safety checklist. You should be checking for not just the obvious things, but where's the parking lot? How well lit is it? Because when guests leave, and sometimes people come to a wedding alone, and when they leave, it might be at night. Who are there cameras out? Who's going to see the guests when they depart at the end of the evening? And the reason why this is so key is that we, as event professionals, have what they call duty of care. We have a moral and legal responsibility to create an environment as safe as we possibly can. And so when it comes down to it, if anybody ever said, because, we're going to get thrown in a pot if something goes down, right, of liability. If something goes down, we want to be able to say, we did our due diligence as far as duty of care is concerned. And we planned a pool party. My team planned a pool party earlier this year, and the parents wanted to just have buckets around with these fun little alcoholic beverages, and they look like adult Capri Suns. That seems to be a thing this year. And they didn't want them to be tended. And I said, we're not carrying out our duty of care. They can be near the bar, so the bartender can monitor them, but I don't want to not be able to monitor guest intake of alcohol. Not monitor like I'm the bouncer or the police, but just one, I don't want to have it in a place where minors can access it. And two, you want to be able to notice if somebody is hitting at those little Capri Suns a little too much. And again, it just blows me away, the things we have now. And that's part of the bartender's responsibility. That's what they do. If you put it someplace other than the bar, then you have put yourself in line of the liability for the bar. And you don't want to do that. Something as simple as wedding planners, what we'll do is bring a drink to the couple. Hey, would you like a drink? I'll grab one for you. And guess what? We shouldn't be doing that, because then we just automatically put ourselves in that list of people who are responsible for the bar. What we should be saying is, here, let me grab the maitre d'. They'll take care of you. I'll let them know you want a drink.
I think that's really important what you just said, because even if it's not the wedding planner and it's another wedding vendor, I think they're being nice. It could be a DJ, a photographer.
Just trying to be helpful.
It's their special day.
Mm-hmm.
You just said that. Wow.
Yeah, I've done it. I mean, I have done it.
You've probably done that many times.
Many times.
You're at their beck and call, kind of. You're just taking care of them, making sure they're having a good time. Very interesting.
Right. Instead, what you can do is work with the caterer to assign one of the banquet staff to them. Oh. Hey, you're here. You're like the catering concierge to the couple and their immediate family. Let them take care of them.
Check in on them every once in a while. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kawania, I know you started out with contracts.
Mm-hmm.
I think contracts are so important, and that's why I want to go back to this. Is because it's just as important for the bride and groom as it is for the vendor itself.
Yes.
In 2020, we had 138 weddings canceled. Ugh. And they were canceled or postponed, let me say that.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it or not, we are still dealing with a few weddings that are still holding on to that date.
Mm-hmm.
And I have looked, even since we met you, I went back and looked at my contract, and I did change some wording in it. But I mean, it's so important to protect us also along with the bride and groom. But I mean, we can get stuck in something like I've got one now that I'm not kidding. They've even postponed it for the 6th time.
Oh,
and it's all because of COVID. And it's like, you know what? And I have finally turned around and changed my contract, and they've had to re-sign it again. And at first I didn't feel comfortable doing that, but I thought, we can only do this for so many times. And for one thing, prices of everything has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
In the grocery stores, everywhere, and also in florists. So we have even said, we're going to have to meet again and sit down and go over everything, because it's going to be completely different than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I just think those contracts are so important, and I've learned that from you. Thank you.
Well, I love that you brought out a couple of the clauses. I don't want to missay it. And I think sometimes couples, you're so excited, you got the venue you wanted. Do you really read over that? And if you're a wedding planner, and you're going on, you're planning your own event, if you take away anything from this episode, it's really important to read through. It doesn't matter how long it takes you to read through and even ask about what you're talking about, the emergency preparedness, and knowing those plans. If you do not have a planner there to help guide you or lead the way up to your wedding or on wedding day. Sharon, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
I was just going to, I feel like I could just talk to her forever, but as a wedding planner, as cliche as it sounds, I do feel a huge responsibility, not only to the couple, but every single person in that room. I feel like to some level, I have a responsibility for them. And I've had some things come up recently, like with people being overserved. As a wedding planner, what can I do to be more proactive? And not let things get to the point where, I'm pulled away from the bride and groom because I'm dealing with a disruptive guest or an ill guest, or, what are the things I should be doing to be proactive and ready for things that can happen at a reception?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. And if you just indulge me 1 second, I want to say what a couple should do when it comes to contracts that I think couples don't do is, there's a line from a movie that Denzel Washington and Tom Hanks was in, and he would always say, explain this to me like I'm a 3-year-old. Remember that movie? And I always tell couples, the problem is you guys, everybody's so afraid to say, I don't understand this clause. And so if a couple has a contract and they read through it and there's a clause that goes over their head, they should go back to the venue or the vendor and say, explain this to me like I'm a 3-year-old. I don't understand it. You should not sign a thing unless you know exactly what you are signing. You said
the perfect thing right there. And, I have so many couples come in. I have had at least 7 the last 2 days. Mm-hmm. And I do handle my contract, and I want them to read over it, but they don't read over it. They do get a copy of it to take home, but they just sign it and go on with it. And then, 6 months later or a week before the wedding is, what am I supposed to do here? But it's all in black and white right there in that contract. Yeah.
Yeah. I've learned now to put those little spots in the contract where they have to initial. I need you to initial here.
I have an initial, and they'll just initial it and not even read it.
Oh, good gracious. Well, you've done your due diligence.
I've done my job.
Yes. Now, as a wedding planner, first things first is we have what we call, when we do the walkthrough and a final meeting, I had all those crazy moments. Number 1, what guest should I be concerned about? Because guess what? They already know who's going to get overserved. They already know. We all got the Uncle Pookie who's going to see all this free alcohol, who's going to see all this free alcohol and lose his mind. So they all know that, or a bridesmaid or a groomsman or somebody who's going to just drink a little too much. I let them know. First I ask, who should I be concerned about? I need you to tell me. And 2, I want full authorization to cut off your guest. And I don't want any question. I don't care if it's dad. I will come up to the bar and say, don't serve dad anymore. And I don't believe in the watering down because I believe that's illegal anyhow. But I'm like, cut them off. That's it. we're done. And if it gets too bad, we have put more than our share of guests in a cab. And if they
I
are,
just did that for the very first time toward the end of the year.
yeah, and here's my philosophy. If they're too intoxicated that they are like out of it, I make their guests go with them.
Right.
I'm like, you can come back, but I'm not sending a woman home in a taxi cab and with somebody she doesn't know, and she's that intoxicated.
Right.
You're going to have to take your guest home. And so I come at that probably like a mom, like, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to deal with it. But I don't feel bad for cutting off guests who've been drinking too much. I also want to know when I go back and say, tell me about guests I need to be aware of, because there are certain things like illnesses that looks like intoxication. Is there anybody in the wedding party? And I ask, this is a personal information. I keep it because we keep a chart of our wedding guests, and now we keep it for our wedding vendors, name, contact information, and then their emergency contact. But I want to know about any allergies, food allergies, anything like that, or any illnesses that I should be concerned of. Because things like diabetes, if your sugar's low, it looks like you're intoxicated.
Right.
And so I don't want to be the medical professional, but I want to be able to send them in the right direction. And that is, believe me, my insurance agent and my attorney are probably twitching because they're both thinking, why is Kawania talking about this? But they'd be the first to tell me, you cannot administer any medication. You cannot do any of these things. I'm not trying to. I just want to direct them in the right direction. And if I already know that they're diabetic, then my first thing is I'm going to mention that to the medical professional when they're on site, because they may treat that person differently.
I have a question. So if a couple is listening and they're not using a wedding professional,
Mm-hmm.
is this a conversation that you feel like they should have with the bar company or bar staff at the venue? What you just went over about the information for the wedding planner?
In advance. They should, on their final walkthrough, on their first walkthrough, it should come up. It should almost annoy people because they bring it up so much. But it should be, that conversation could be the difference between someone's life and death. And that sounds really dramatic. I do realize that. But you do hear about things happening at weddings.
It sounds dramatic, but it's true.
It's true.
Yes.
It's true. So, and I think what I want to drive the point home, Sharon, because we're friends, I know there's been instances in the past that you've talked to me about that haven't even been your own weddings, but don't be hesitant to talk to your wedding planner, your bar service, whoever that needs to be. If there's a person in your family, on your friends, on your guest list that could potentially not be able to control themselves, or there could be an issue there, this is your day, your event. Don't be embarrassed by it. Don't think twice about talking about it, I guess is the point.
Well, and I think sometimes the burden is on me as the wedding planner to make them comfortable enough. They need to trust me enough that what is said here stays here. But I've even asked couples that had a true concern to give me a photo of the person, and I've given that to my DJ, I've given it to the bartenders and my assistant. No one else sees it, no one else knows. Mm-hmm. But those people that are there for the whole evening and need to know are aware of that person. And, it's worked for me. But it's those ones that don't tell me and I don't know to be aware of that person that you get in a mess.
Well, I think everybody would be surprised too how much or how many times this does happen, or things happen behind the scenes that all your guests are really going to know about. I know working with Sharon over the past few years, there's been some dramatic things that's happened and even one bride even told us or told you that this will probably happen.
Yeah,
And it happened.
it did.
And I just think I am so thrilled that we're talking to her today because I
was so
I
excited.
think it's very good information that everybody needs to know about.
Well, and we talked about this before. These couples, they're not constantly planning events. They don't know what they don't know. But what Kawania is sharing some light on with us and our guest is there's things out there that can happen, that have happened at events. You hope it doesn't happen, but we need to talk about it because Sharon, like we've said before, it comes back to education.
Yeah. One time I had an event, and it's one of those venues where they hand you the key on Friday and it's yours, the venue's yours.
Yep.
And I will tell you, for years, I never thought of it. I used to always think, what a benefit. I love this. I can get so much done. Until I happened to teach hospitality at a local community college. I did active shooter training. And all of a sudden, my brain went back to weddings. And I thought, somebody could walk into this venue and I have no security here to protect us. And, because usually they're just big halls that we're talking about. So now, if I get a venue like that where the key is handed over to me, I will let the couple know we need to get security. We need somebody because it's just us and we're not prepared to handle if somebody, it doesn't have to be an active shooter, just could be somebody who wandered in off the street. We don't have anybody here to protect us. So now I'm, and that is something a couple should think about because people use these halls for baby showers and bridal showers, and you're not thinking anything of it. It's like, oh, this is a hall, and not realizing how vulnerable they are, and that vulnerable position they put their guests in.
Literally, I mean, not an active shooter, thank God, but just had my experience, first ever, with true wedding crashers. We did a wedding at a very, I would say higher end, very high end hotel downtown. And my assistant is the sweetest person you've ever met, but she's not quite as assertive as me,
or
blunt as me. And it's about 9:30, 10 o'clock, and this was a formal wedding. I mean, everyone was dressed to the nines, and she comes up to me and taps me on the shoulder, and she said, "Sharon, I don't think those men belong here." And I said, "What men?" And I turned around, and there were two men in blue jeans. One had on a John Deere hoodie, the bright green. I mean, he stood out. The other one I don't even remember what shirt he had on. But they each had a drink in each hand. I am not kidding. And I went up to them, and, my assistant was a little afraid to, and I wasn't thinking. And I just went up to these two men, and I'm like, can I help you? And it became very evident after about 2 minutes that what they were doing. And I started thinking, what am I going to do if I tell them to leave and they tell me no?
Right.
It hit me like, what am I doing here? Why am I the one doing this? But thank goodness they were just like, okay, lady, we're busted, But yeah. I thought about it afterwards, and I was like, what would I have done if they told me no? So,
which means that tells you right off the bat, your spidey senses were telling you, I should not be doing this.
Yes, that's what was happening.
Yeah. So that if you have crashers, it should always be, let me call security.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
And you know what? I just think about this, Sharon. I was there at that event, but I'm sitting here in my mind thinking, how many event places have other guests there, have access to where people can come in the doors, up the elevator, right into your event space, that not are just our wedding crashers, but have not good intentions.
Well, there's a very popular venue here in town, and above the venue floors are apartments. And I've literally had people like taking their dog out to potty right through my cocktail hour. So
you've had it all, Sharon.
It happened. That's why I was so excited for her, you guys. I'm like, finally, the answers. Yeah.
Yeah, dogs.
What I hear you saying is you don't do an event without security.
Well, what I'm saying is, and it's taken me years to figure it out, not every job is mine to take on.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing for wedding professionals because we are alphas and we think that should be like, I got this, I'll take care of it. No, some things just are not our job. And the three things that fall for me: lost child, medical emergency, security emergency. Somebody loses their child, let me get somebody for you. It is not my responsibility to help someone. And I don't want that to sound callous, because I remember one time taking care of a wedding that was out on the water, and I happened to go outside just to get some air, and somebody's 4-year-old, one of the 4-year-old flower girls, was hanging out there by herself.
Oh my!
Now she was admiring the flowers, but my first thought was 30 more paces and she would have been in the water.
Mm.
And everybody was dancing. Nobody noticed she was gone. In that moment, I thought, okay, I can't call anybody. I need to walk this little girl back inside.
So the mom comes out and you're going to go get that baby.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But if we are in a scenario and we're standing around and there's other people, I'm going to call security, because that is what they're for, and they are trained for that. Most security professionals are CPR certified. They're trained to handle the removal of people. And I mean, and they are licensed and insured for those type of duties. We pass it on. And the same goes if somebody takes ill, and you're right. You should always know where the closest hospital is with an emergency room, because I learned the hard way that that's not always the case.
Yeah.
Right. And I also want to know where the closest pharmacy is, because sometimes it just comes down to, if we don't have it, because halfway through a wedding season, I may not have checked that emergency kit and all the Benadryl's gone or something like that. So it's always good to know where the closest pharmacy is if something occurs. But the other thing that advice I'd give to a couple or wedding professional is make sure somebody's there who can do a run for you. So many people work and they don't have enough people there, or they don't have somebody who can do a run to the pharmacy or go find help or something like that. And so that's when you start taking yourself away from the wedding to go address something in advance. If I may, can I hit on something that I think too many people don't think about? When we have outdoor ceremonies, I always want to do a safety walkthrough of an outdoor ceremony. In my career, my wedding career, outside of worrying about divots, which is an easy thing to be concerned about, snakes and random dogs have popped up. You dealt with the snakes?
Yes,
we have a story.
And I keep thinking what a nightmare that would be during the middle of a ceremony if a snake slithered up to the...
For sure, I'd be up on a chair. I know what my plan would be.
We have to go get that defibrillator that we know where it is for Mike.
Yeah. Yes.
Mike does not do snakes at all.
So I do a walkthrough, and that's one of the first questions I ask. What type of animals do I should I be concerned with?
Sorry, Mike, I dropped the ball.
Sharon, please add that to your list. That is an amazing tip.
About 100 tips, and I swear that's the perfect one you could have pulled out right now.
I put my friend the florist in a mess.
In a bit of a pickle.
They called it Copperhead Alley.
Oh, so we
before the event.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I should have heard her speak.
You know what though, Mike? I don't think Sharon would share that information with you, because why?
Because I wouldn't have been there.
Maybe that needs to be on the back of page 2 so nobody can see that.
So you literally ask about animals.
I ask about animals for 2 reasons. One, I've had to use the broom to push a snake away before. And I thought, please, snake, just comply. Please comply. Like I'm willing it away. But the other is we had this, it was a private residence, this beautiful wedding, and it was open air, these two long farm tables, and somebody's collie showed up.
Oh.
And when we were trying to get rid of it, it thought it wanted us to it wanted to play. And it kept jumping, and I thought, oh, that cake is going down.
Oh,
and
my
it
goodness.
and it just so happened that was the day I learned the woman who worked with me was afraid of dogs.
Oh,
And so we, had to finally we found the family, but who the dog belonged to, but it really did give me quite the heartache. I mean, the dog wasn't aggressive. It wanted to play.
right.
And this was the middle of a dinner reception. There was food out on these long farm table. There's this beautiful cake on a table. And all I envisioned was that scene from the Brady Bunch
Yeah.
back when the dog took out the cake.
Yeah.
Yes. So
But
I do ask about animals.
Yeah, that was a good time. But I mean, we even know a planner that had a event and a dog got out of the house
Yeah.
and actually attacked a child. So I mean, that was positive, but then it could be worse. I mean, it could be good. I mean, that's very smart to think about.
That is
The
smart.
animal thing can apply to many different things.
Yeah.
I got
Mhm.
you next time, Mike.
Thank you. Snake.
Especially pretty weddings out at these historic homes on these acres and acres of land. You're not thinking about foxes, all the rodents and all those little things. The venue knows about those things. You can't tell me they don't know they have little bunny rabbits or a fox running through their property. And more than, it doesn't occur to people, oh, I should tell people about these things. Because they're assuming that if people are congregating, it won't show up. And every now and then you get a little something, a little scurry that feels very brave and, ready to meet the world that you want to be. Or if nothing else, can you spray the area so we can repel some of these before they come? These are just little things that I don't think, and it's part of a safety checklist that we don't think to ask about. I mean, we get the obvious. How do I get somebody in a wheelchair down here? What do I do if there are divots so nobody trips and falls? But there are other little things that happen simply because we are outside amongst nature that we don't think about.
I love it.
Well, I knew we were talking about crisis today, but I didn't realize we were going to get into this deep into so many different things that I wasn't even thinking about. So I think
I've got 2 pages of notes.
Well, here's my thing with crises. Like, I've been through the big ones. I've had a big 1,100 person dinner in Manhattan that was scheduled to take place right the day after 9/11. So that's a whole different level. I've had a speaker die from a heart attack. I've had those type of instances. But what I explain to people, most of your crises are going to be what I call goofy stuff. It's going to be the goofy things that throw you. You're like, man, I had to deal with a fox today, or I had to deal with a snake today.
A dead deer. I have a dead deer story too. But...
Oh, that's right. That's right.
She knows about it.
Yeah, I remember hearing, and I think Angela Prophet talked about it. Was that you? She was, yeah. Yes. And
for a dead deer.
I mean, you gotta be. I'm happy to be famous for anything. I'll take it.
Kawania, I know we could talk all day, honestly, maybe for a few days. And Mike, Sharon, before we wrap this up, any other questions? I mean, I know this has been so helpful.
I can't think of any other questions, but I just want to say a huge thank you. Like, I have so much respect for what you offer. I've learned so much. I learned from you at conference, and then I literally have taken 2 pages of notes again today. I told you I bought my new contract template, and now I'm going to go home and I'm going to customize it. And there's going to question.
Well, I just want to say thank you for being here today. And when we met you, or I met you for the first time at the ABC conference, I mean, I knew you had to be on this.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
I
Thank
am
you.
so excited that you were here. So thank you very much.
And
It was
Kawania,
my pleasure.
I'm glad that you've enjoyed it, and maybe down the road you want to come back and be another guest, because I know we've just hit it off, all of us, and we've talked about this so much. Education is such a big part with planning events, especially weddings. And I know that you have so many different topics that you could share with our audience, and we really appreciate your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And if I may, I'd like to share that I do have an emergency preparedness template, and it's
Sharon,
it
go
is
ahead.
on
Sharon's looking over her paper.
it is on the Enlightened Creative website. So it's theenlightenedcreative.com/boutique, and there's an emergency template on there, and I'm going to add a promo code BLING. So it will take 25% off of it.
Oh, well,
Oh,
thank
that's
you.
amazing. That's awesome.
We'll put a
And-
link to it in the show notes and on social media, so that way people can get right
Okay.
to the link. And I will say this,
Absolutely.
Kawania does have very helpful information and guides and things like that on her website. But thank you, Kawania, for sharing that with our audience and the promo code. We really appreciate that.
I will be, as soon as Christina gives me a break, I'm gonna go get me one of those.
Okay, and if I share, there's a template for you and it's more for wedding professionals. There's also a crisis management wedding planning guidebook, and it has all those checklists, the checklist for accessibility that we didn't have time to touch on, or safety, and it's all in a book with the checklist, but both have those same checklists in them, and it's my pleasure.
She just shared with us the next topics we
That's
can
right.
cover with her.
That's right. We're going to see you again real soon.
So maybe we
Yes.
can get some time scheduled with you here in a few months and have you back on as a guest.
Oh, it would be my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. Please go and follow Kawania Wooten on social media. The links will be in the show notes. Or if you want to go to our website, they will be in her guest profile. And as always, when we have a guest on, if you'd like to see the video version of this, you're welcome to go to our YouTube channel. We'd love to hear your feedback or any questions you may have. Just visit our website and hit the contact button. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Kawania, again, thank you for your time. And
Thank you.
until next time, see ya.